Ladies, gentlemen, and adventurers of all ages, I know this may surprise you, but it is somehow time once again. Baldurs Gate 3 is incredibly deep in so many ways, and for such a large and open world, it seems like there is something to do, find, or loot every 3 or 4 meters of walking around. It is crazy dense, and while you may have been someone who spent 200 hours in your first playthrough just getting through Act 1 and 2, really just trying to experience everything the game has to offer, I bet there are at least a few items that you have never seen within this game. And today I'm going to show you some of them, as well as some that, while people are aware of, are just incredibly hard to actually get for yourself. And so today is, of course, another collection of some of the rarest items that exist within the game. Of course, if you know any of the rare items that are not mentioned here, ones that are obscure and actually really hard to get, feel free to leave them down in the comments and we might even share them with everyone else in a future episode of this series. Last thing before we begin then, just a slight disclaimer that this does exclude legendary items, of course, because while yes, logically speaking, legendary items are the rarest ones technically speaking, they are also pretty common knowledge within the community, which makes them far less rare than their actual in-game rarity would imply, so we are ignoring those. Without further ado then, let's get going all the way back in Act 1, where we actually have a few items that I think people are likely to have missed out on right now. The first one is the Vision of the Absolute, a unique spear. To actually get this thing for yourself, you have to undergo a bit of a crafting mission after finding 2 separate pieces. The first one of these pieces is found on this hill located here on your map in Act 1, where you will meet a dwarf who is severely injured. After some conversation, he will die and you'll be able to loot him to find the broken spear shaft item on him. Then if you head immediately west, you will find the Owlbear Cave. Most players will know about this cave, but after finding out what is inside, most of us just sort of live and let live. We leave and let them keep going on. If, however, you decide to go full bloodthirsty maniac and kill the Owlbear, you can loot it to find the broken spearhead item on it. If you then combine the broken shaft with the broken spearhead, you create a whole new weapon, the Vision of the Absolute. This weapon is a spear, 1d8, with the special effect of Absolute Night. This rolls to potentially blind people that you attack with the weapon, making them roll a dex saving throw to prevent it. And this weapon also deals 2 to 12 bonus damage to quote-unquote certain creatures that sport multiple sets of eyes. So, you know, it's pretty special. Generally speaking, this one is less about the power of the item than the obscurity of it. While this is probably the least rare item on today's list, I still bet the majority of people have never seen this before. Second up is the sickle. It is just called sickle, but I'm going to start specifically referring to it as the redcap sickle, because there are other sickles in the game that function differently, but the redcap sickle is simply the best sickle that exists because it has unique stats compared to the others, but you simply cannot get it through normal means. This weapon is wielded by the redcap enemies out of the Blighted Village Waygate in Act 1 on the way to Auntie Ethel. The melee redcaps all use this weapon, but they do not drop it when they die. It's not something that you can loot off of their corpses. Instead, if you want to get this item, you have to use Heat Metal as a spell to make them drop their weapon, or Command Drop to make them drop it, or anything along those lines that forces a disarm of any kind. Then within the same turn, you have to pick up their weapon off of the floor before they can pick it back up themselves. Once you have it, it is yours. And this is a light weapon with 2d4 damage, which is actually surprisingly good for a weapon of this size that you can easily dual wield. Consider that daggers are normally 1d4. Normal sickles are 1d4 as well, but for whatever reason, this sickle that you can only get through funky gameplay choices is 2d4, literally twice as strong. Yes, there are no secondary effects on this, but this only matters so much when the damage is this good anyways, especially because you can get this super early on in the game. Third today is the Club of Hill Giant Strength. This one is pretty cool, not only because the item itself is special, but the way that you get it is just absolutely ridiculous. In Act 1, within the Underdark area, there is a place called the Arcane Tower on the south of the initial area, before you get to Grimforge. After you parkour your way down to the bottom of the tower on the rear side, you can get the Sorcerer flowers that are in the back. Bring one of them inside to power the elevator, and then you can use the elevator from there to go up to the top of the tower. At the top of this tower, there is a fight against a number of constructs led by Bernard that can be quite the battle. Once you defeat him, he does have items on him as loot, and also he has things that lead to more secrets that can quickly get you to leave the room very fast. However, in this room, there is actually quite the secret of its own. On the northern side of the area, under a little awning, you will find a stool. This doesn't pop up even if you press Alt, it only pops up if you happen to walk over and hover over it with your mouse manually. What does pop up then is Stool of Hill Giant Strength. Then you just have some pretty normal options for a stool, like you can sit on it. If instead you attack the stool, it will break apart and drop an item on the ground, one of the legs of the stool, which is called the Club of Hill Giant Strength. This is quite simply a club that sets your strength to 19. Very interesting to have, and it definitely has some obscure usage, but it's weird to have a weapon like this being the thing that sets your stat while also not being, well, a great weapon. It's nice, but it is far from a good weapon, and a regular strength character can easily hit 19 pretty early, so it's not crazy. But the fact that to actually get this, you have to stumble upon this random stool with a special name, decide to to break the stool, then pick up its leg off of the floor. It's crazy to me. Fourth up then is the snowburst ring. This one is found in Act 2 in a somewhat obscure place. Specifically, it is in Last Light Inn, actually, but in a far corner of the building, and only findable if you pass a perception check. Specifically, this is on the northeastern side of the building on the first floor, where you can find this quaint little bedroom area. By the bed, there is a loose floorboard that you can spot with passive perception checks. Then, of course, if you do, you can interact with it to loot it, and if you do, you'll find this ring along with a letter inside. As far as what the ring itself is then, this gives you the snowburst effect, which makes it so when the wearer does cold damage, they also create a 4.5 meter circle of ice around the target of the attack. This is surprisingly good when used correctly, and can really cause some problems for your enemies if they then try to move out of the circle of ice after the fact, potentially falling over, losing movement, losing actions. It's pretty solid and in a somewhat obscure place to find too. Fifth up today then is the Deva mace, which is both exceptionally strong and very, very strange in how you acquire it. Before we even dive into the how, I do feel compelled to show you the item itself first. Yes, it is a gray weapon, but look at the actual stats. 1d6 normal, but then plus 48 radiant damage. The extra 1d4 is not from the weapon itself, but the rest of it is all just base on the weapon, which means at base, this weapon hits for 5 to 38 damage per swing, not counting in anything on the character wielding it in the slightest. So yeah, it is absolutely nutty strong. How do you get it then? Well, early in Act 3, when you reach the lower city area, you will find the Stormshore Tabernacle building right here. Inside of this building, there is a locked cellar in the corner that you can only get into if the NPC inside isn't looking at you while you do it. Once you are in the cellar, it is filled with traps that you'll have to navigate until you can reach the vault at the back of the area. Inside of the vault, there are a number of chests, each one of them with strong items inside of them. And if you take any of these items from the chests, you will get a curse. If you take multiple items, you will get multiple curses. It stacks up. If you then use remove curse or any other way of removing this debuff, it will spawn in a deva enemy, or multiple of them, specifically matching the number of items that you stole. This can also trigger naturally over time. Remove curse just makes it more of a purposeful timing rather than one that can be a bit of a nasty overlap. Kill the devas that spawn and the curse will be gone. Try to loot them and you'll find nothing. There is nothing to actually pick up off of them. But if you then do a long rest, then after the long rest, go back to wherever the place is that you killed the devas in your game, you will find pouches on the floor where their bodies used to be. Inside of the pouches, you will find this item, the Deva mace, once for each enemy that you killed. The obscureness of this comes from the fact that you have to get the curse in the first place, but then afterwards you have to kill the enemy that spawns from the curse, and then it doesn't even come from looting them because you have to do a long rest and then go back to the exact same place after to find the tiny little pouch on the ground that contains it. Sixth, then we've got something equally obscure but for a very different reason, the hat of the sharpcaster. This item is great as far as what it does, totally worth having, and the way that you get it is quite strange, being an interaction with a Tressum named Tara, but only one that can be had if you did something quite specific beforehand. At the start of Act 3 in Rivington, you can hear about how the letters being sent off to other places are not always getting to their destination, and the reason for this turns out to be Tara herself, who is killing and eating some of the pigeons. You can find her for the first time on top of the Open Hand Temple in Rivington by jumping or flying up there however you choose, and you can talk to her with Speak with Animals to get her to stop killing the pigeons, and this ends with her saying that she has a lead on some interesting items and she'll be hanging out in the lower city instead. You may think that that is a successful end to this and this will move it forwards, but it's actually not. If you do this, Tara will never reappear again. In order to have Tara come back, you specifically have to talk to her the first time with Gale present in your party and actually nearby, as she is actually essentially just Gale's cat. He won't understand what she says, but basically the same result will happen on the roof. You get an item, you get the rings, Tara promises to stop eating pigeons, but this time because you did it with Gale, she will move to a new location for you to find. Specifically, this is atop the Devil's Fee building in the lower city area of Act 3 up on the northern side. You can climb this building any way that you see fit to get to the roof, but you do have to get to the roof. An easy way is from the second floor balcony. There is a little pillar that you can get to and then jump from there up to the roof, and then on the roof you will find Tara once more. Only this time you will be able to trade with her, and in her inventory you will find an item called the Hat of the Sharpcaster for a measly 70 gold. Nothing at all as far as cost goes, but the item itself is actually really good, giving the Sharpcaster effect, which makes it so when you roll a 1 or a 2 on a spell damage die, that die will be re-rolled. Essentially, this means that you can just up your spell damage quite a fair bit on average by cutting out the worst possible luck scenarios when casting. Then our final item for today is going to be a very meh item in itself as far as the power goes, but the rarity is definitely extreme on this one, and that's what this collection's about. Yeah, sure, a good few of the items are exceptionally strong compared to other things at similar points in the game, but this one is definitely more about the rarity of the item more than anything else, and that is Hope's quarterstaff. In Act 3, you can enter the House of Hope, which is the big devilish area, and it's a really fun time to be there. there. It's totally worth interacting with if you haven't. As you progress the main quest within this area, though, you will eventually find and release an NPC called Hope, who has been taken prisoner while here. Once you have done so, they fight alongside you until you get out, by which I mean that you actually have control of them. The fun part is, while there is no way to get their equivalent normally, you can, while you have control of this character, make them throw their own weapon on the floor. Then you can pick the weapon up off of the floor with one of your other characters to put it in your inventory, basically just stealing it, but with consent. As far as the weapon itself, it's just a quarterstaff +2. Sadly, nothing particularly special, but how many of you thought to even try doing this? Because, well, it works in a few other spots in the game too, to get items that you simply would not be able to get otherwise. And that does it for today, everyone. Another nice meaty collection of items that are super rare in Baldur's Gate 3, coming from particularly obscure places or just generally unchosen decisions, and a good majority of them are actually quite strong items too, which makes it even more interesting how hard they are to get. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and I hope that you learned about at least a couple of items that you'd never seen yourself before, as I always find the more hidden stuff in these types of games to be really fun to actually go out and collect. Of course, again, if you know of any more particularly rare or obscure items within the game, feel free to stick them in the comments and we might even show everyone else these items in the future. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.